Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, let us walk the well-worn paths of Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit of simple pleasures and unexpected courage. His journey is one of adventure, yet not of war and conquest. It is a tale of quiet steps taken into the unknown, of fear overcome by heart, and of a small figure standing before the great forces of Middle-earth, not with a sword, but with wit and resilience. Before we start, I would like to request all of you like this tale, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Please share with your friends so that it reaches many more ears. Your small actions are a kind gesture of your support, and it keeps me motivated to produce more such stories. Now, my sleepy fellows, as you settle deeper into comfort, let me tell you of a tale both familiar and yet filled with hidden wonders. A story of an unassuming hobbit who walked a road no one expected him to tread. You have heard of mighty kings and warriors, of elves with wisdom as deep as the stars, of wizards who weave great spells. But this is not their story. This is the tale of Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who lived in the heart of the Shire, who treasured his books and maps, his pantry filled with good food, and the peace of a well-tended garden. A hobbit who, by chance or by fate, was chosen for a journey beyond anything he could have imagined. For you see, courage is not always loud, nor is it found only upon battlefields or in grand halls. Sometimes it is in the quiet step forward when fear whispers to turn back. It is in the steadying of hands when doubt weighs heavy. And it is in the smallest of choices, ones that shape not just a life, but the world itself. Tonight, we follow Bilbo's quiet courage, from the warmth of his home to the deep halls of dwarves, the gloom of dark forests, and the great shadows of dragons. Through each step of his journey, we will see the strength hidden within his heart, the courage that changed the course of Middle-earth. So, close your eyes now and let the gentle rhythm of this tale lull you deeper into rest. The Shire waits, the road stretches before us, and an adventure unlike any other is about to begin. Let us take our first steps into the past, into the world of hobbits and dwarves, of stolen treasures and hidden bravery. Let us walk with Bilbo Baggins and see the courage he never knew he had. The Shire is a land of gentle hills and golden harvests, where streams murmur softly and birds sing from the hedgerows. It is a place where time flows slowly, where the worries of the world beyond seldom reach the quiet paths of hobbit folk. And nestled among these rolling green lands, beneath Bag End's round green door, lived one such hobbit who never sought adventure, nor thought himself fit for anything beyond his books, his tea, and the warmth of his hearth. His name was Bilbo Baggins. Now, Bilbo was, by all accounts, a respectable hobbit, one who enjoyed a predictable life. He had no great tales to tell, nor any interest in seeking them. His days were spent tending his garden, reading maps of places he would never visit, and enjoying second breakfasts with no concern for danger or destiny. Yet there was something within him, a quiet longing, like a forgotten ember waiting for the right wind to stir it into flame. It was not a desire for gold or glory, but something deeper, the wonder of the unknown, the call of the road stretching beyond the hills. He would not admit it, of course. No, Bilbo was quite content in his well-ordered life, until the day a wizard knocked upon his door. Gandalf the Grey, with his long staff and wise eyes, arrived like a whisper of adventure on the wind. He did not demand nor command, but he saw within Bilbo something hidden, something that even the hobbit himself did not yet understand. And so the journey began, though not in haste. It began with a quiet choice, a small step forward, a moment of hesitation before the road called him beyond the familiar lanes of the Shire. But where did this road lead? What awaited him beyond the peaceful green hills of his home? Bilbo did not yet know that his path would take him into the deep halls of the dwarves, into dark forests filled with shadows, into caves where riddles could mean life or death, and before the very gaze of a dragon whose fire could consume the world. He did not know that his heart, so accustomed to peace, would be tested, nor that his courage, buried deep beneath comfort and routine, would shine brighter than any treasure hoarded in the mountains. And so, my sleepy fellows, as we follow Bilbo Baggins upon his journey, let us walk beside him, feeling the weight of his choices, the stirring of his courage, and the quiet power of one small hobbit in a world of great and terrible things. Close your eyes now and listen. Can you hear it? The distant call of adventure, the echo of dwarven songs, the murmur of trees older than memory. The journey is about to begin. The road stretched before them, winding through rolling green hills and dipping into misty valleys where rivers ran cold and clear. At first, the company moved at an easy pace, their laughter light, their songs rising beneath the open sky. The familiar comforts of home had not yet faded, and for Bilbo, the weight of his decision had not fully settled upon his shoulders. Yet, as the days passed, the landscape changed. The fields gave way to rocky outcroppings, the trees grew taller and closer, and the nights seemed darker, colder. The stars, once bright above the Shire, now seemed distant, veiled by shifting clouds. Bilbo had never wandered so far from home before. Each night, as the fire burned low and the company settled into uneasy sleep, he lay awake, feeling the vastness of the world pressing in around him. The road ahead was long, but something deeper troubled him. He had been chosen as a burglar, yet what did that mean? He had never stolen so much as a pie from a neighbor's window. How could he hope to be of any use to a company of warriors and wanderers? And then came the trolls. The attack came swift and unexpected. The company had wandered too close to a hidden camp, where 3 massive trolls sat hunched around a fire, their grotesque faces twisted with hunger. Bilbo was pushed forward, his heart pounding. "Go on, burglar," Thorin murmured, his eyes sharp in the firelight. "Prove yourself." Bilbo swallowed. His hands trembled at his sides. Stealing from trolls? Surely not. Yet, he had no choice. Keeping low, he crept forward, the warmth of the fire pressing against his skin. The trolls sat arguing, their deep voices rumbling through the clearing. "Not enough meat," one grumbled. "We need something plump." "Aye, Another muttered, "Something tender." Bilbo winced. Tender? That was not a word he liked to hear in this context. His fingers brushed against a small pouch hanging from the nearest troll's belt. If he could just... A twig snapped beneath his foot. The world seemed to freeze. The next thing Bilbo knew, two massive fingers curled around him, lifting him off the ground. The trolls leaned in, their breath hot and foul. "What's this?" one growled, shaking him slightly. "A little rat sneaking about?" The others grinned. "Looks tasty." Bilbo squirmed, his mind racing. He needed to think. And then a voice. "What have you caught there, lads?" The trolls froze, eyes darting to the shadows. "Gandalf." The wizard's voice rang out again, shifting in tone, mimicking the troll's own speech. "Didn't you lot say that hobbits were too stringy to eat?" The trolls frowned. "Did we?" "Aye, you did. Must have been last week." The confusion settled in, and Gandalf stepped from the shadows, raising his staff. Dawn's light broke over the trees, spilling across the clearing. The trolls stiffened. Their bodies turned to stone where they stood, their faces frozen in perpetual confusion. Bilbo dropped to the ground with a thud, coughing. Balin's hand was there, steadying him. "Not bad, burglar." Bilbo blinked. Had he just survived? The road stretched onward, deeper into the wild lands beyond the Shire. The gentle fields had long vanished, replaced by craggy slopes and shadowed glens where strange sounds echoed through the trees. And then came the mountains. Bilbo had never seen such towering peaks, their jagged edges cutting against the sky. Snow dusted their tops, and the wind howled through their passes. The company pressed forward, but Bilbo could feel something watching them. Something old, something patient. Then, one night, they vanished. Bilbo awoke to darkness. The warmth of the fire was gone, the soft murmur of his companions replaced by silence. And then laughter, not the hearty chuckles of dwarves nor the knowing mirth of Gandalf. No, this laughter was high and sharp, echoing off unseen walls. Bilbo turned, but there was no sky. The stars had disappeared. He was no longer in the mountains. He was beneath them. The air was damp and stifling, thick with the scent of stone and decay. Bilbo scrambled to his feet, his hands brushing against rough walls. His heart pounded. The others, where were the others? A flicker of light ahead, torches lining an uneven tunnel, and beyond them, the gleam of twisted metal, the clatter of goblin feet. Bilbo pressed himself against the wall, breath shallow. The goblins were speaking in a guttural tongue, their words half snarled, half laughed. He could hear chains clinking, and then Thorin's voice. They had been captured. Bilbo's mind raced. What could he do? He was no warrior, he had no sword. He was just a hobbit in a world much larger than himself. And yet, his feet moved before his mind could stop them. Step by step, he followed the tunnel deeper. If there was any hope of escape, he had to find it, even if he had to face the darkness alone. The air was thick with the damp scent of earth and stone, and the only sounds that filled the cavernous tunnels were the distant, grating voices of goblins and the occasional drip of water from unseen places above. Bilbo pressed his back against the cold rock wall, his breath shallow, his fingers trembling against the hilt of the small dagger that had been given to him. Not yet a sword, not yet something he felt he had the right to wield. Somewhere beyond the winding tunnels, the dwarves were in chains, their voices echoing faintly through the dark. But Bilbo had no plan. He was alone, without Gandalf, without Thorin's stern guidance, without any certainty of what lay ahead. And yet, something deep inside him stirred, something that had not been there before. Fear, yes, but not just fear, something more, a quiet resolve. He was not strong, nor was he skilled in battle, but he was small, he was clever, and perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough. So he took a breath, steadied himself, and stepped forward. Bilbo crept deeper into the tunnels, his feet barely making a sound against the rough ground. He had spent his life walking quietly, unnoticed in the Shire, and now that skill was his only weapon. Through twisting corridors and narrow crevices, he moved like a whisper, guided by the dim torchlight ahead, and then voices. The goblins had gathered in a great hall, their forms hunched and twisted in the flickering light. Their leader, a great swollen creature draped in patchwork rags, lounged atop a mound of scavenged treasure, and there, bound in chains, were the dwarves. Thorin knelt before the goblin chief, his eyes blazing with fury, but even he was powerless against their numbers. The goblins jeered, laughing among themselves, delighting in their catch. Bilbo's heart pounded. What could he do? He had no strength to fight them, no magic to call upon. But he had something else, a mind quick enough to find a way. He had watched Gandalf talk circles around trolls, had seen him bend their simple thoughts to his will. Perhaps words could be a weapon just as sharp as swords. Carefully, he slipped forward, drawing closer to the goblins. Bilbo was no warrior, but he was a hobbit, and hobbits knew how to move unseen. As the goblins bickered, he took a long, slow breath, then stepped forward into the torchlight. The laughter stopped. A dozen goblin eyes turned toward him, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion. Bilbo straightened his coat, dusted himself off, and raised a single finger as if addressing a crowd. "Well," he said, voice steady, "this is all very unnecessary." A ripple of murmurs ran through the goblins. "Who are you?" the goblin chief snarled. Bilbo tilted his head as if considering. An observer, a traveler, and quite frankly, a bit disappointed. The goblins frowned. Disappointed? Bilbo sighed theatrically, pacing a few steps forward. "You see, I heard tales of the great goblin halls, cunning creatures, ruthless warriors, masters of the shadows." He gestured toward the chained dwarves. "And yet, this is the best you can do, stealing travelers off the road?" He could see the seed of doubt creeping into their minds. Goblins were not clever. They were suspicious, easily swayed. Bilbo pressed forward. "I suppose if this is how you wish to be remembered, so be it," he mused, "but I would have thought goblins prided themselves on greater schemes than this." The goblin chief sat forward, his massive, warty hands tightening on his throne. "What are you saying?" Bilbo shrugged. "I am saying that I expected more, and so will others when they hear of this." The goblins muttered amongst themselves. Doubt flickered in their beady eyes, A single crack in their certainty. That was all he needed. And then, in the shadows beyond the hall, something shifted. A whisper of movement, a flicker of gray robes in the firelight. Gandalf. Before the goblins could question further, a great flash of light split the cavern. The torches sputtered and died. The goblins reeled backward, their cries of alarm echoing off the stone. And then, in the chaos, a voice rang out, commanding, ancient, unyielding. Enough! The fire roared back to life, and there stood Gandalf, his staff ablaze with white light, his presence filling the cavern with something greater than fear, power. The goblins shrank back, their bravado gone. The spell was broken. The dwarves seized their chance. With a cry, Thorin and his company surged forward, breaking free of their captors, turning the confusion into an escape. Bilbo scrambled backward, ducking beneath a swinging goblin blade, his breath coming fast. The world was a blur of movement, shouts, clashes, the gleam of steel and firelight, and in the midst of it all, Bilbo found himself running. He had survived. He had played his part, but the night was not done, for even as the goblin halls collapsed into chaos, Bilbo's path was about to take a very different turn. The tunnels twisted and turned, their paths splitting in a maze of shadow and stone. In the frantic escape, Bilbo lost sight of the others. One wrong turn, one misstep, and suddenly he was falling. The world spun around him, the tunnel vanishing into a black void, his breath catching as he plunged into the unknown. He landed hard against cold stone, his limbs aching. The only sound was the distant trickle of water, the soft drip, 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 echoing in the vast emptiness. Bilbo pulled himself up, his head still spinning, and then he saw it, a single distant glow, faint and eerie, reflecting off the underground lake ahead. And in the silence of that cavern, something moved, something watched, something waited. Bilbo's breath came shallow and fast, his chest rising and falling as he pressed his back against the cold, damp rock. The cavern stretched before him, vast and unknowable, the ceiling lost to shadows that swallowed even the faintest light. He had been falling, tumbling through the dark, flailing through the emptiness, until the unseen ground had met him with cruel indifference. Now he lay in a place where no sunlight had touched for an age, a silent abyss where the very air carried a strange weight. He was alone. The sounds of the goblin tunnels were long gone, swallowed by the depths of the mountain. No dwarves, no Gandalf, only the faint lapping of water against stone and the slow, distant drip of unseen moisture. Bilbo swallowed, his fingers tightening around the small dagger at his side, its surface cool and smooth. It was not a sword, not really, but it was the only thing between him and whatever lurked in the shadows. For something was watching, something moved. Far across the black lake, beyond the scattered, jagged rocks that rose like broken teeth from the water's edge, a pair of pale, round eyes glowed in the darkness. And then came the voice, soft, whispering, slithering through the air like the flickering of unseen flames. "What is it, precious?" Bilbo froze, his pulse roaring in his ears. The thing in the darkness shifted, its voice low, drawn out, almost playful. A thief, yes. A sneak, creeping through the tunnels, stealing things that do not belong to it. Oh, yes. Bilbo's grip on his dagger tightened. I am not a thief, he said quickly, trying to steady his voice. Just lost. A sound like wet laughter echoed across the cavern. Lost? Oh, poor little thing. Lost and alone, yes. No frenzies, no escape. The pale eyes blinked, then they began to move, circling, gliding over the stones with unnatural ease. Bilbo's mind raced. He did not know what this creature was, but he could feel it, a hunger, a cunning that slithered beneath every whispered word. And then an idea formed, a distraction, a game. If I'm lost, he said, swallowing down his fear, perhaps you can help me. The creature stopped. Help? Help a thief? A sneak? Why should we? Bilbo forced a small nervous laugh. Well, you seem clever, he said carefully. I imagine you enjoy a good riddle. The eyes widened. For a moment, silence. Then, a soft, sharp inhale. Oh, riddles, riddles in the dark. A game had begun. The creature, Gollum, it called itself, crawled closer, but never too close. The riddles began. Bilbo, his mind desperate for any way to keep himself safe, pulled from the old Shire tales, from childhood games spoken over tea and cakes. A box without hinges, key or lid, yet golden treasure inside is hid. Gollum hissed and muttered, pacing along the rocks. Eggses! Eggses! Bilbo nodded quickly, forcing a small smile. Gollum's turn. His riddles were stranger, older, filled with words Bilbo had never heard before, but he answered where he could, mind sharpening with each exchange. Yet the longer they played, the clearer it became. Gollum was not simply playing for fun. He was playing for a prize. If it loses, we eats it, Gollum muttered to himself, his long fingers tapping against the rock. Bilbo's mouth went dry. He had no choice but to win. Bilbo's final riddle left Gollum fumbling, hissing, clutching at his head as he muttered to himself. And then, a stroke of fate. As Bilbo shifted on the stones, his hand brushed against something smooth and cold, half buried beneath the dirt. A ring, small, unassuming, something about it sent a shiver up his spine. Without thinking, he slipped it into his pocket. Gollum did not notice. Instead, he howled in frustration, screeching as he slammed his hands into the water. Cheated! It cheats! We hates it forever. Then suddenly, his face twisted in realization. Wait, it has the precious. Bilbo's breath caught in his throat, and then Gollum lunged. Without thinking, Bilbo stumbled back, his foot slipping on the damp stone. As Gollum scrambled forward, shrieking with fury, Bilbo did the only thing his instincts told him to. He ran. Gollum gave chase, his voice a maddened, rasping wail in the dark. Thief! Thief! Filthy thief! Bilbo's heart thundered. He turned a corner, ducking into a low passage, his breath ragged. And then it happened. As he moved, the ring slipped onto his finger, and the world changed. Everything went silent. His hands, his very form, was gone. Invisible, Gollum rushed past him, hissing, sniffing at the air, but he did not see. For the first time since this nightmare began, Bilbo had the advantage. He followed Gollum, watching, unseen, as the creature muttered to itself, pacing toward the tunnels that led to the outside world. Bilbo could see it now, his way out, and yet he hesitated. He could kill Gollum, strike him down while he was unaware. Gandalf would say it was the wise thing to do. Thorin would say it was the necessary thing. But as Bilbo stood there, dagger in hand, something held him back. Pity, not for the monster, but for what Gollum had once been. A broken creature, twisted by loss and time, and the weight of his own torment. Bilbo lowered the blade. Instead, he stepped past, silent as a whisper, and slipped toward the tunnel leading to freedom. As he emerged into the dim light of the mountain's edge, the wind cool against his skin, Bilbo turned back for a final glance into the darkness behind him. The ring sat cold in his pocket, its weight far heavier than it should have been. He did not yet know that his voice had been forever changed. Bilbo stumbled out of the tunnels, blinking against the pale light of day that filtered through the narrow crevice. His breath came fast, his limbs weak beneath him. The air outside the mountain was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and distant rain, but Bilbo could not yet take it in. His heart was still racing from the escape, from the madness in Gollum's voice, the sharp thrill of the chase, and the quiet, terrifying weight of the ring in his pocket. The ring, his fingers brushed against it, still hidden, still cold. He had no time to think about it now. The dwarves, he needed to find the dwarves. A distant clang of steel and a muffled shout caught his ear. They were close. Bilbo crept along the rocky ledge, careful where he placed his feet. Below, at the foot of the mountain, he saw them, the company, surrounded by goblins. Gandalf was at the front, his staff raised, light crackling at its tip. Thorin stood beside him, sword drawn, a grim determination in his stance. The others were tired, bruised, but still standing, and yet the goblins pressed forward, their jagged weapons gleaming in the half-light. Bilbo acted before thinking. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the ring. There was no hesitation this time. He slipped it onto his finger. The world shifted. The air became strange and distant, the sounds muffled, as if he stood behind an invisible wall, but most importantly, he was gone. The goblins had not seen him before. They would not see him now. Bilbo descended the rocks with careful steps, slipping behind the goblins like a ghost. His small dagger, his not-quite sword, gleamed in his hand. He may not have been a warrior, but he was clever, and he had a chance. One goblin, standing at the back, a scout, a signaler. Bilbo lunged, the dagger flashed, a quick, decisive strike, nothing lethal, just enough to send the goblin crashing forward, disrupting the ranks. Confusion spread like fire. The goblins turned on one another, snarling, their crude ranks breaking apart. And in that moment of hesitation, Gandalf struck. Light erupted from his staff, blinding in the twilight gloom. The dwarves charged forward, their weapons flashing, voices rising in defiance. Bilbo remained still, breath held, unseen. His work was done. By the time the last goblin had fled into the trees, the dwarves stood victorious, their bodies weary, but their spirits unbroken. Bilbo hesitated at the edge of the battlefield, watching as the others caught their breath, and then he removed the ring. The world snapped back into focus, the sounds sharper, the weight of his own body returning. He took a step forward, and the moment Thorin's eyes landed on him, the dwarf froze. Baggins, Bilbo forced a small smile, brushing the dirt from his coat. Yes, I know. Took me long enough to get back. The others stared. How? Balin began, eyes narrowing. We didn't see you. Bilbo hesitated. He could not explain, not yet. Instead, he shrugged. Guess I'm getting the hang of this burglar business. Silence stretched, and then laughter. It started with Balin, then spread to the others, a relieved, weary sound, as if the tension of the night finally broke. Even Thorin, though he did not laugh, nodded once in approval. For the first time since leaving the Shire, Bilbo felt like he belonged. As the company gathered their things and prepared to move on, Bilbo stood slightly apart, his fingers once again brushing against the ring in his pocket. It was small, unremarkable, and yet it had saved him, had given him a power he never expected to wield. But even as he turned it over in his hands, a thought whispered at the back of his mind. Why had Gollum called it precious? And why did he feel, deep down, that this was only the beginning? As the shadows of the Misty Mountains faded behind them, the company pressed forward, leaving behind the horrors of goblin tunnels and the deep places where nameless things slithered unseen. The air felt lighter, though the journey ahead was still long and fraught with uncertainty. Bilbo walked a few steps behind the others, his thoughts turning inward, his fingers resting lightly on the small golden ring tucked safely in his pocket. It was such a simple thing, smooth and cold, yet something about it stirred in him an unease he could not name. He had not told the others. How could he? How could he explain the way the world shifted when he slipped it onto his finger, the way sound seemed to bend around him, the way the air felt thin, stretched, unnatural? No. For now, he would keep it secret, just a small trinket, a lucky find, nothing more. Since the night in the goblin tunnels, something had changed between Bilbo and the dwarves. They no longer looked at him with doubt or amusement, no longer whispered about whether he belonged among them. Balin, who had once chuckled at the thought of a hobbit burglar, now nodded to him with a quiet sort of respect. Dwalin, who had questioned Gandalf's choice, patted Bilbo on the back as they walked, a silent acknowledgement. Even Thorin, though still proud and often distant, had looked at him differently, as if seeing, for the first time, a glimpse of the courage Bilbo himself had yet to recognize. It was not strength. It was not skill in battle. It was something else entirely, a quiet kind of bravery, a courage that did not roar, but endured. That night, as the company camped beneath the open sky for the first time in what felt like an age, Bilbo sat a little apart from the others, his gaze drawn upwards to the stars. How long had it been since he had last seen them? After the gloom of the goblin tunnels, the sky felt impossibly vast, endless in its quiet beauty. Gandalf settled down beside him, the faint glow of his pipe flickering in the darkness. A fine night, wouldn't you say? Bilbo nodded. It is. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without turning his head, Gandalf said, "You did well back there." Bilbo blinked. "Did I?" The wizard chuckled softly. "Do you doubt it?" Bilbo hesitated. There had been fear, so much fear, but he had kept moving. He had faced the goblins. He had survived Gollum. His fingers brushed against the ring in his pocket. He had escaped, but how much of it had been his own doing? He looked at Gandalf, the question unspoken on his lips, but the wizard only smiled, exhaling a slow ring of smoke into the night air. "Courage is not the absence of fear, my dear Bilbo. It is what you do despite it." The words settled over him like a blanket of warmth, but even as he nodded, a shadow of doubt remained. The morning came, with the golden touch of the rising sun, stretching long rays over the hills ahead. The company gathered their things, tightened their packs, and resumed their march eastward. The Misty Mountains had been left behind, but greater dangers still lay ahead. Mirkwood, the woodland realm, and beyond that, the lonely mountain itself. Bilbo took a steadying breath and stepped forward. For better or worse, he was part of this journey now, and something deep inside told him he was not the same hobbit who had left the Shire. And so, my sleepy fellows, the road still winds on, stretching toward destinies yet unknown. And as Bilbo Baggins takes each step, his courage grows, though he does not yet see the shape of the path laid before him. But for now, my sleepy fellows, let this tale settle within you like a whisper of an old adventure, a lullaby of distant lands and starlit skies. The fire has burned low, the night is deep, and it is time to rest. Close your eyes now. Let the stars above Middle-earth guide you into gentle dreams, for another tale will come when the road calls once more.